Hello and welcome to the Short Story Workshop. In each episode, we read a short story and then discuss it. My name is Mel, I'm here with Matt and Simone. This week's story is Lazarus Comes Forth by Ray Bradbury. Matt, you picked this story. Tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, so Ray Bradbury, great guy, great writer. Obviously most well known for Fahrenheit 451. Great book, I read it last year. Everyone loves it. But I think that where Ray Bradbury really shines is in his short stories. I've read quite a few now. They've all been good. Some of them published in Weird Tales throughout the 20th century. This one is from Planet Stories, a magazine from in the did science fiction. The story was in the 40s, I think it was published. Yeah, I like Ray Bradbury's writing style. It's very distinctive, very actiony focused, I think, and nice to get some more science fiction to the podcast, which I've been trying to do. I enjoyed this one. It's got a cool voice, cool ending. I liked it a lot.
Oh, yeah, it was 1944.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, I enjoyed this. Okay, so here is Lazarus Comes Forth by Ray Bradbury.
Logan's way of laughing was bad. There's a new body up in the airlock, Brandon. Climb the rungs and have a look. Logan's eyes had a green shine to them, eager and intent. They were ugly, obscene. Brandon swore under his breath. This room of the morgue ship was crowded with their two personalities. Besides that, there were scores of cold shelves of bodies freezing quietly, and the insistent vibration of the coroner tables, machinery spinning under them. And Logan was like a little machine that never stopped talking. Leave me alone. Brandon rose up, tall and thin by the years, looking as old as a pocked meteor. Just keep quiet. Logan sucked his cigarette. Scared to go upstairs? Scared it might be your son we just picked up? Brandon reached Logan in about one stride, and while the morgue ship slipped on through space, he clenched the coroner's blue uniform with the small bones inside it and hung it up against the wall, pressing inward until Logan couldn't breathe. Logan blew air. His eyes looked helpless. He tried to speak and could only grunt like a stuck pig. He waved his short arms, flapping. Brandon kept him there, crucified on a fist. I told you. Let me search for my own son's body in my own way. I don't need your tongue. Logan's eyes were losing their shine, but getting blind and glazed. Brandon stepped back, releasing the little assistant. Logan bumped softly against metal flooring, his mouth hungry for air, his nostrils flaring for breath. Brandon watched the little face of Logan over the crouched, gasping body, with red colour and anger shooting up into it with every passing second. Coward! He threw it out of himself, Logan did. Got yellow neon tubing for your spine. Coward! Never went to war. Never did anything for Earth against Mars. Brandon said the words in slow motion. Shut up. Why? Logan crept back, inching up the metal hull. The blood pumps under the skirts of the tables pulsed across the warm silence. Does it hurt, the truth? Your son would be proud of you, okay? Ha! He coughed and spat. He was so damn ashamed of you, he went and signed up for space combat, so he got lost from his ship during a battle. Logan licked his lips very carefully. So to make up for it, you signed on a morgue ship. Try to find his body, try to make amends. I know you. You wouldn't join the Space Warriors to fight. No guts for that. Had to get a nice, easy job on a morgue ship. Lines appeared in Brandon's gaunt cheeks. His eyes were closed, the lids pale. He said, and tried to believe it himself, someone has to pick up the bodies after the battle. They can't go flying on forever in their own orbits. They deserve burial. The bitterness of Logan struck even deeper. Who are you trying to convince? He was on his feet now. Me, it's different. I got a right to running this ship. I was in the other war. You're a liar, Brandon retorted. You hunted radium in the asteroids with a mineral tug. You took this morgue ship job just so you could go right on hunting radium, picking up bodies on the side. Logan laughed softly, but not humorously. So what? At least I'm no coward. I'll burn anybody gets in my way. He fought it over. Unless, he added, they give me a little money. Brandon turned away, feeling ill. He forced himself to climb up the rungs toward that airlock where that fresh body lay, newly stillborn from space by the retrieving claw. His palms let wet shining prints on the rungs. His climbing feet made a soft noise in the cold metal silence. The body lay in the cold airlock center, as thousands had lain before. Its posture was one of easy slumber, relaxed and not speaking ever again. Brandon took in his breath. Numbly, he realized it was not his son. Every time a new body was found, he feared and yet hoped it would be Richard. Richard of the easy laughter and good smile and dark curly hair. Richard who was now floating off somewhere, towards some far eternity. Brandon's eyes dilated. He went to his knees and with efficient darts of his eyes, he covered the vital points of this strange uniform with the young body inside it. His heart pounded briefly, and when he got up again, he acted like he had been struck in the face. He walked unsteadily to the rungs. "Logan!" he called down the hole in a numb voice. "Logan, come up here, quick!" Logan climbed lazily up, emitting grunts and smoke. "Look here," said Brandon, kneeling again by the body. Logan looked, and didn't believe it. "Where in hell did you get that?" Lying there, the face of the body was like snow framed by the ebon black of the hair. The eyes were blue jewels caught in the snow. There were slender fingers reclining against the hips, but, most important of all, was the cut of the silver metal uniform, the grey leather belt, and the bronze triangle over the silent heart with the numerals 51 on it. Logan held onto the rungs. 300 years old, he whispered it. 300 years old, he said. Yes, the numerals 51 were enough for Brandon. After all these centuries, and in perfect condition, look how calm he is. Most corpse faces aren't pretty. Something happened 300 years ago, and he's been drifting alone ever since. Brandon caught his breath. "What's wrong?" snapped Logan. "This man," said Brandon wonderingly, "committed suicide." "How do you figure?" "There's not a mark of decompression, centrifugal force, disintegrator, or ray burn on him. He simply stepped out of a ship. Why should a scientist of the 51 Circle commit suicide?" "They had wars back there too," said Logan. "But this is the first time I ever seen a stiff from one of them. It can't happen. He should have been messed up by meteors." A strange prickling crept over Brandon. When I was a kid, I remember thumbing through history books, reading about those famous 51 scientists of the Circle who were doing experimental work on Pluto back in the year 2100. I memorized their uniforms and this bronze badge. I couldn't mistake it. There was a rumor they had been experimenting with some new universal power weapon. "A myth," said Logan. "Who knows, maybe. Maybe not." But before that super weapon was completed, Earth fell beneath Mars' assault. The 51 scientists destroyed themselves and their base when the Martians came. The myth says that if the Martians had been only a month later, the weapon would have been out of blueprint and into metal. Brandon stopped talking and looked at the long-boned, easily slumbering scientist. "And now he shows up, one of the original 51. I wonder what happened. Maybe he tried to reach Earth and had to leap into space to escape the Martians. Logan, we've got history with us, pulled in out of space, cold and stark, under our hands." Logan laughed uneasily. "Yeah, now if we only had that weapon, baby, that'd be something to sing about, by God." Brandon jerked. Logan looked at him. "What's eating you?" Brandon laid his fingers on the dead scientist's skull. "Maybe, just maybe, we have got the weapon," he said. His hand trembled. The coroner pumps throbbed warmly under the table while manipulating tendrils darted swiftly, effectively, over the dead scientist's body. Brandon moved too, like a machine. In a regular fury, he had forced Logan to hurry the body down into the preparations room, inject adrenaline, thermal units, apply the blood pump, and accomplish 1,000 other demanding and instantaneous tasks. "Now, out of the way, Logan, you're more trouble than help." Logan stumbled back. Okay, don't get snotty. It won't work. I keep telling you all these years." Brandon could see nothing. Logan's voice was muffled far away. There was only the surge of pumps, the sweating heat of the little cubicle, and niche number 12 waiting to receive this body if he failed. Brandon swallowed tightly. Niche number 12 waiting, cold, ready, waiting for a body to fill it. He'd have to fight to keep it empty. He began to sing-song words over and over as he injected stimulants into the body. He didn't know where the words came from childhood, maybe, from his old religious memories. "Lazarus, come forth," Brandon said softly, bending close. adjusting the manipulatory tendrils. Lazarus, come forth. Logan snorted. Lazarus, will you can that? Brandon had to talk to himself. Inside his brain, he's got the energy weapon that Earth can use to end the war. It's been frozen in there 300 years, if we can thaw it out. Who's ever heard of reviving a body after that long? He's perfectly preserved, perfectly frozen. Oh, God, this is fate. I know it. I feel it. Came to find Richard and I found something bigger. Lazarus, Lazarus, come forth from the tomb. The machines thrummed louder, beating into his ears. Brandon listened, watched for just one pulse, just one beat, one word, one moment of life. Air for the lungs. And Brandon attached oxygen cones over the fine nose and relaxed lips. Pressure on the ribs. Metal plates pressuring the ribcage slowly out and in. Circulation. Brandon touched the control at the foot of the table, and the whole table tilted back and forth in a whining teeter-totter. A report clipped through on the audio. Morgue ship, Battle Unit 766 calling Morgue ship. Off orbit of Pluto 234C, C.02 off 32, 1/7 follow-up. Battle just terminated. 6 Martian ships destroyed. 1 Earth ship blasted apart, bodies thrown into space. Please recover. 79 men. Bodies in orbit heading towards Sun at 23456 an hour. Check. Logan flipped his cigarette away. That's us. We've got work to do. Come on, let that stiff cool. He'll be here when we get back. No! Brandon fairly shouted it, eyes wild. He's more important than all those men out there. We can help them later. He can help us now. The table came to a halt, bringing absolute silence. Brandon bent forward to press his ear against the warmed rib casing. Wait. There it was, unbelievably. There it was, a tiny pulse, stirring like a termite down under, softly and sluggishly moving through the body, jabbing the heart, and now! Brandon cried out. He was shaking all over. He was setting the machine in operation again, and talking and laughing and going crazy with it. He's alive! He's alive! Lazarus has come forth from the tomb. Lazarus reborn again. Notify Earth immediately! At the end of an hour, the pulse was timing normal, the temperature was lowering down from a fever, and Brandon moved about the preparations room watching every quiver of the body's internal organs through the tubular fluoroscope. He exulted. This was having Richard alive again. It was compensation. You roared into space looking somewhere for your lost self-respect, your pride, looking for your son who was shooting on some soundless orbit into nothing, and now the biggest child of fate is deposited in your arms to warm and bring to life. It was impossible. It was good. Brandon almost laughed. He almost forgot he had ever known fear of death. This was conquering it. This was like bringing Richard back to life, but even more. It meant things to Earth and humanity, things about weapons and power and peace. Logan interrupted Brandon's exultant thinking by blowing smoke in his face. You know something, Brandy? This is damn good. You done something, mister. Yeah. I thought I told you to notify Earth. Ah, I've been watching you, like a mama hen and her chick. I've been thinking too. Yeah. Logan shook ashes off his smoke. Ever since you pulled in this prize fish, I've been turning it over in my mind. Go up to the radio room and call Earth. We've got to rush the scientists to Moon Base immediately. We can talk later. There was that hard green shine to Logan's narrow eyes again. He poked a finger at Brandon. Here's the way I get it. Do we get rewarded for finding this guy? Hell no. It's our routine work. We're supposed to pick up bodies. Here we got a guy who's the key to the whole damn war. Brandon's lips hardly moved. Call Earth. Now, hold on a moment, Brandy. Let me finish this. I've been thinking, maybe the Martians would like to own him too. Maybe they'd like to be around when he starts talking. Brandon made a fist. You heard what I said. Logan put his hand behind him. I just want to talk peaceable with you, Brandy. I don't want trouble. But all we get for finding this stiff is a kiss on the cheek and a medal on the chest. Hell! Brandon was going to hit him hard before he saw the gun in Logan's fingers whipped out and pointing. Take a look at this, Brandy, and don't lose your supper. In spite of himself, Brandon quailed. It was almost involuntary action. His whole body plunged back, aching, pulling with it. Now let's march up to the radio room. I got a little calling to do. Get on with you. Ha! In the radio room, Logan touched studs, raised a mic to his lips, and said, Beam to Mars, beam to Mars. Morgue ship of Earth calling. Mars beam answer. After an interval, Marv's gave an answer. Logan said, I've just picked up the body of a 51 Circle scientist. He's been resuscitated. Give me your fleet commander. I got things to talk over with him. Logan smiled. Oh, hello, Commander. Half an hour later, the discussions were over, the plans made. Logan hung up, satisfied. Brandon looked at him as if he couldn't believe he was serious. Back down in the control room, Logan set a course and then forced Brandon to get the body ready. He bragged about the deal. A half-ton of radium brandy. Not bad, eh? Good pay. More than Earth would ever give me for my routine duty. Brandon shuddered. You fool. The Martians will kill us. Logan pantomimed him into moving the body onto a roller table and taking it to the emergency lifecraft airlock. I'm not that dumb. I'm having you wire this emergency lifeboat with explosive. We collect the minerals first. We blow up the body if the Martians act funny. We make them wait until we've collected our half and gotten 5 hours start toward Earth before we allow them to pick up the body. Nice, huh? Brandon swayed over the task of wiring the lifeboat with explosive. You're cutting your own throat, handing over a weapon like that to the Martian enemy. It was no again from Logan. After the Martians pick up the body and we're safely on our way home to Earth, I press a button and the whole damn thing blows up. They call it double crossing. Destroy the body? Hell yes! Think I want a weapon like that turned over to the enemy? Gah! The war will go on for years. So Earth will wind up winning anyhow. We're getting along, slow but sure. And when the war's over, I got a load of radium to set myself up in business and a big future in front of me. So you kill millions of men for that? What did they do for me? Ruin my guts in the last war? There had to be some argument, something to say, quick, something to do to a man like Logan. Brandon fought quickly. Look, Logan, we can work this, but save the body. Don't be funny. Put one of the other bodies in the ship we send out. Save Lazarus's body and run back to Earth with it, insisted Brandon. The little assistant shook his head. The Martians will have an intramaterial beam focused on the emergency ship when they get within 100,000 miles of her. They'll be able to tell then if the body's dead or alive. No dice, Brandy. It was hardly like leaping himself, thought Brandon. It was just frustration and rage and unthinking action. Brandon jumped. Logan hardly flicked an eyelid as he pressed the trigger of his paragun. It paralyzed the legs from under Brandon, and he collapsed. The gun sprayed over his groin and chest and face, too, in a withering shower of red-hot needles. The lights went out. There was a loose sensation of empty space, an acceleration minus power. Pure, soundless momentum. Brandon forced his eyes open painfully and found himself alone in the preparations room, lying stretched upon one of the coroner tables, bound with metal fibre. Logan! He bellowed it up through the ship. He waited. He did it again. Logan! He fought the metal fibre, knotting his fists, twisting his arms. He yanked himself back and forth. It pretty well held, except for a looseness in the right-hand binding. He worked on that. Upstairs, a queer, detached Martian bass voice intoned itself. 500,000 miles. Prepare your emergency craft with the body of the scientist inside of it, morgue ship. At 300,000 miles, release the emergency craft. We'll release our mineral payment ship now, giving you a half-hour leeway to pick it up. It contains the exact amount you asked for. Logan's voice next. Good. The scientist is alive still and doing well. You're getting a bargain. Brandon's face whitened, bringing out all the hard, scared bones of it, the cheeks and brow and chin bones. He jerked against the binding, and it only jumped the air from his lungs, so he sobbed. Breathing deeply, he lay back. They were taking his child back out into space. Lazarus, his second son, whom he had birthed out of space with a metal retriever, they were taking back out and away from him. You can't have your real son, so you take the second best and you slap him into breathing life, into breathing consciousness, and before he is a day old, they try to tear him away from you again. Brandon fairly yelled against his manacles of wire. Sweat came down his face, and the stuff from his eyes wasn't all sweat. Logan tiptoed down the hard rungs, grinning. Awake, sleeping beauty? Brandon said nothing. His right hand was loosened. It was wet and loosened, working like a small white animal at his side, slipping from its wire trap. You can't go ahead with it, Logan. Why not? The Earth Tribunal will find out. You won't tell them. Logan was doing something across the room. He was the only moving thing in front of 100 cold shelves of sleeping warriors. Brandon gasped, tried to get up, fell back. How will you fake my death? With an injection of sulfacardium. Heart failure. Too much pulse on a too old heart. Simple. Logan turned and there was a hypodermic in his hand. Brandon lay there. The ship went on and on. The body was upstairs, lying breathing in its metal cradle, mothered by him and jerked to life by him, and now going away. Brandon managed to say, Do me a favour. What? Give me the drug now. I don't want to be awake when you send Lazarus out. I don't want that. Sure. Logan came walking across the deck, raising the hypodermic. It glittered hard and silver, fine and sharp. One more thing, Logan. Hurry it up. Only one arm free, one leg able to move slightly. Logan was pressing against the table now. The hypodermic hesitated in his fingers. This, said Brandon. With one foot, Brandon kicked the teeter-totter control at the base of the board. The board, whining, began to elevate swiftly. With his free arm instantly pulling the last way free from the wire, Brandon clutched Logan's screaming head and jammed it down onto the table under the descending board. Board and metal base ground together and kept on going 3 inches. Logan screamed only once. The sound after that was so horrible that Brandon retched. Logan's body slumped and hung, arms slack. Hypo dropped and shattered on the deck. The whole table kept going up and down, up and down. It made Brandon sicker with each movement. The whole room revolved, tipped, spun sickishly. The corpses in all their niches seemed to shiver with it. He managed to kick the control to neutral and the table poised, elevated at the heels, so blood pounded hotly into Brandon's pale face, lighting, colouring it. His heart was pounding furiously, and the chronometer upon the whole wall clicked out time passing, and miles with it, and Martians coming so much the closer. He fought the remaining wires continuously, cursing, bringing threads and beads of blood from raw wrist, ankle, and hips. Red lights buzzed like insects on the ceiling, spelling out, Rocket coming, unknown craft, rocket approaching. Hold on, Lazarus. Don't let them wake you all the way up. Don't let them take you. Better for you to go on slumbering forever. The wire on his left wrist sprang open. It took another 5 minutes to bleed himself out of the ankle wires. The ship spun on, all too quickly. Not looking at Logan's body, Brandon sprang from the table and with an infinite weariness tried to speed himself up the rungs. His mind raced ahead, but his body could only sludge rung after rung upward into the radio room. The door to the emergency rocket boat was wide, and inside, living quietly, cheeks pink, pulse beating softly in throat, Lazarus lay unthinking, unknowing that his new father had come into his presence. Brandon glanced at his wrist chronometer. Almost time to slam that door, shoving Lazarus out into space to meet the Martians. 5 minutes. He stood there sweating. Then decided he put a tight audio beam straight on through to green Earth. Earth. Morgue ship coming home. Morgue ship coming home. Important cargo. Important cargo. Please meet us off at the moon. Setting the ship controls into an automatic mesh, he felt the thundering jets explode to life under him. It was not alone their shaking that pulsed through his body, it was something of himself too. He was sick. He wanted to get back to Earth so badly, he was violently ill with the desire. To forget all of war and death. He could give Lazarus to the enemy and then turn homeward. Yes, he supposed he could do that. But give up a second son when you already have given up one? No. No. Or destroy the body now? Brandon fingered a ray gun momentarily. Then he threw it away from him, eyes closed, swaying. No. And if he should try to run away to Earth now, the Martians would pursue and capture him. There was no speed in a morgue ship to outdistance superior craft. Brandon walked unsteadily to the side of the sleeping scientist. He watched him a moment, touching him, looking at him with a lost light in his eyes. Then he began the final preparations, lifting the scientist, going toward the life rocket. The Martians intercepted the emergency life rocket at 5199 CVZ. The morgue ship itself was nowhere visible. It had already completed its arc and was driving back toward Earth. The body of Lazarus was hurried into the hospital cubicle of the Martian rocket. The body was laid upon a table, and immediate efforts were made to bring it out of its centuries of rest. Lazarus reclined, silver uniform belted across the middle with soft mouse grey leather, bronze symbol 51 over the heart. Breathlessly, the Martians crowded in about the body, probing, examining, trying, waiting. The room got very warm. The little purple eyes blinked hot and tensed. Lazarus was breathing deeply now, sighing into full aware life. Lazarus coming from the tomb, after 300 years of a void death. Armed guards stood on both sides of the medical table, weapons poised, torture mechanisms ready to make Lazarus speak if he refused to tell. The eyes of Lazarus fluttered open. Lazarus out of the tomb. Lazarus seeing his companions, iris widening upon itself, forcing shape out of mist. Seeing the curious blue skulls of anxious Martians collected in a watching crowd around him. Lazarus living, breathing, ready to speak. Lazarus lifted his head, curiously, parted his lips, wetted them with his tongue, and then spoke. His first words were, "What time is it?" It was a simple sentence, and all of the Martians bent forward to catch its significance as one of the Martians replied, 23:45. Lazarus nodded and closed his eyes and lay back. Good. He's safe then by now. He's safe. The Martians closed in, waiting for the next important words of the waking dead. Lazarus kept his eyes closed, and he trembled a little as if, in spite of himself, he couldn't help it. He said, "My name is Brandon." Then Lazarus laughed.
I liked this story. The ending, though, is very strikingly similar to a story we talked about not that long ago.
Do you think?
Yeah, it's body
I
swapping.
mean, they both have a twist, but other than that,
It's body
and I
swapping.
suppose I guess there's like that similarity, but in this one they don't like literally take the body. Like it's not mind
So
control.
you're talking about Beyond Lies the Web, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I thought it had some similarity.
In terms of structure and the way the twist works, it is similar, but I think that they're quite different in other ways.
Okay, well,
Like, I guess we'll get into it later.
yes. I like that the whole story is like set up so quickly by an argument between these two guys, and that they're doing something that's a bit less commonplace in sci-fi. They're not like the heroes of the hour. They're not like going to fight for Earth or Mars, or they're just there like cleaning up afterwards in like a very more forgotten kind of role.
I like the job idea a lot. The morgue ship, there's something so wonderfully dark about that, and yet very practical at the same time.
Yeah, it reminded me a bit of one of Becky Chambers' books. Has a bit about what happens to the dead who are left floating in space, and I was like, oh, same ideas.
Which book was that?
It was the third one, The Record of a Spaceborne Few.
Okay. Yeah, I like the concept, the way it looks at space travel. It looks at it in a different way by looking at like what other things would we need, right? It ignores the obvious. Oh, we're in space, and instead goes towards how would this change the small things, which is quite cool.
Yeah, I like that.
It just makes it feel a bit more like a real possibility.
It keeps it grounded, right?
Yeah.
And I like the idea that like these bodies just get frozen completely because space, and therefore they are possible to resuscitate them, supposedly.
It is a cool way of using that.
I like the idea a lot, and yet I can't help but wonder, how is this guy protected from like radiation and being smushed into bits by an asteroid? He must be really lucky.
I mean, it's an abandoned battlefield. I guess things don't go there that much. Like, all of the debris will be going the other direction. Like an explosion, it's all out.
Yeah, I mean, for 300 years is quite a while to not hit anything, I guess. But space is pretty empty.
And I'm willing to suspend disbelief.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard for us to conceptualize because space is big. 300 years is a long time.
I do like the idea a lot. All right, so I would say that this story, maybe more than some of the others that we've looked at, relies on genre conventions for the setting, such as you're in a spaceship and things like, I'm sure it mentions very spaceshipy sort of terminology, and you kind of get this kind of world built up very quickly because you know, as someone who's read a lot of sci-fi, this is what a spaceship is like. Do you think someone less familiar with that kind of setting would still be able to follow this story, or do you think it lacks in detail?
As someone who does not read a lot of sci-fi, I think they can follow. Like, I've read, maybe 3 sci-fi novels in my life, most of them very soft sci-fi. One of them being Becky Chambers' Long Way to an Angry Planet. And then I've seen, the rebooted Star Trek movies. Like, I'm not a sci-fi nerd. It's, if you have some idea of a morgue, you have some idea how the spaceship may be structured. It's basically just a floating house.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I just wondered because when I first started watching space stuff, I felt like the setting was really alien to me, but that everybody else understood exactly what was going on and how things worked.
Hmm.
That feeling is
I
less
mean,
now, but I remember at the time thinking a bit like, I think I should know what's going on here and what, like, Captain on the Bridge means and things.
fair. I feel like that would be more if you've seen more sci-fi. That kind of reference would be more important. But I think in this particular story, it's quite short and quite a simple premise, so it's not delving that much into the sci-fi. Like, it almost feels like not a sci-fi novel. It's just using sci-fi elements to talk about a larger emotional, moral decision.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's quite accessible. I think that's probably on purpose. Like you could get into a lot more complicated science fiction concepts if you really wanted to. But he's more or less just stuck with things that you can, like, here is a spaceship, people freeze in space, and you can just kind of accept those. I think most things are explained anyway.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Do you think space is just one of those settings where you can grab it and go, you're in space now, and people will kind of be able to go along with it for the most part without you going into massive detail?
I mean, you have to know what you're writing about. You can't just be like, I'm going to do space and not know how space works, because then people will get mad. But you don't need to be perfect, and it depends how much knowledge you want to assume from your reader, and that kind of decides what kind of sci-fi you're writing. Are you writing sci-fi that anyone could pick up, or are you writing sci-fi that the nerds are going to love, you know?
Like hard sci-fi or soft sci-fi in the same way. Are you writing hard fantasy or soft fantasy?
Yeah.
Is your
Usually,
book a doorstop or not?
doorstop books can be handy. They have dual purposes.
Yeah, as a doorstop.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I guess this kind of leads into the next question. Did you think the background and exposition were communicated well to the reader? Because I did. And if so, like, how is this done or why is maybe the question?
I think it was communicated efficiently, but it was maybe a little bit clumsy.
How so?
I felt the whole explanation at the start of, oh, we're on a morgue ship, and oh, this guy's worried about his son, and oh, this guy used to be in the war. They're like doing it via dialogue, and it kind of feels a little bit like these characters are just telling each other stuff they both already know, or it did to me at least.
I mean, it does, but if you've got to do an info dump in a short amount of time, I would argue that it's dafter to do it in dialogue and an argument than it is to just completely info dump it. Like, I don't know, it's a short story. What are you going to do? You don't have time to weave in all of your exposition very beautifully, do you?
I think,
Yeah,
I think the argument saves it from being,
Yeah, and it sets up what's to come.
yeah, establishes the dynamic between the two characters and also at the same time delivers you, oh, he's lost his son and there's been a massive war between Earth and Mars, and does quite a lot in a very short amount of time, which wow, this is so cool. I'm already
I
invested.
mean, I agree. I think it is very efficient, and it definitely has merit for that, especially being a short story. But if this were a novel, you would do it differently.
You would, but it's not a novel. That's kind of the point.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
How would it be different?
You would have less of this explaining. You would show that they're a morgue ship probably before you just straight up say so.
Yeah, you'd
And
have like your 1% of the story, or like whatever 5% of the story doing all your setup, like the character's normal world before the inciting incident, which would have them time going about their normal morgue duties before it goes weird.
Oh, so there'd
yeah,
be more time at the beginning of.
you could set up their
Basically.
motivations a bit more organically rather than just saying, hey, you're here because of this.
It would be like if I said, hey Matt, it turns out that I really like short stories and that's why we're here doing a podcast.
Yeah, it feels exactly like that. That's how I read it. I thought it was a little bit weird, but it's very efficient to do that rather than having to listen to a whole episode of the podcast to figure out the kind of thing that Mel likes, you see?
Mel likes sword, sorcery, and smooching.
Yes.
Okay, moving on. So another thing this story does quite quickly is it sets up Brandon as the hero and Logan as the villain. I think I do either of you dispute that? I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah, that's clear.
No, it's clear, yeah. It's not particularly nuanced on that front.
You're right, and it takes, I don't know, I was hesitant on labeling the characters so quickly, but after like halfway through the story, you're like, yeah, okay, he's definitely the villain. Brandon's the hero, got it.
And they're not trying to like give him a reason why he'd want money. It's just greed. It's not like I'm trying to feed my family.
I think that's weird because we kind of expect that now in like most stories. You'll get this sort of villainous character doing things, and it's like, it's because my wife died or something, you know? So I was kind of waiting for that, and then it never came. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, he's just a villain then, cool.
I think that's what we've got used to as modern readers, but you save so much space by not doing that.
You do in a short story, though. Again, it depends on the kind of like I think some stories do call for a very black and white villain, then others are more interesting and they in not having that because it allows you to explore some of the characters deeper. Like having a very evil villain is a good way to highlight your protagonist as good, while having a more ambiguous villain is a good way of challenging your protagonist's views and actions.
Which probably makes sense to do over a longer period of time so you can keep the suspense going.
Yes.
I think this is a very plot-focused story, so I don't think adding any more tragic backstory or anything to Logan would really help.
No.
It's the only grain of tragedy in him is that I think he said the war messed him up or something,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but he doesn't really go into.
But then I think part of the story's thematic ideas comes through precisely because he is a very capitalist character motivated by the desire for money, which is frankly something that I think a lot of people have seen in life, and we see, not to get into politics, but we see a lot in our current society. So
Yeah.
it kind of works. Like, it's different to them being like, it's not like they're going around murdering everyone on the ship like a serial killer. It's a different kind of antagonist.
Do you think he's more relatable because he just wants money?
If relatable has a kind of implication of rooting for them almost, and it's not necessarily that, but relatable in the sense of it's something we've all seen and is very much present in our day-to-day life,
It's
then yeah,
easy for us to
relatable.
understand.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is more what I wanted to say, yes.
Makes no, yeah, I figured.
So, yeah, you very quickly, I think, start rooting for Brandon because, I mean, Logan straight up is like, oh, as if you're ever going to find your son or something like that.
It's quite an evil thing to say.
Yeah. I was going to ask if you had any tips on how to quickly set up heroes and villains in short stories. Like, would you do this the same way or would you take a slightly different approach?
It's kind of harks back to something we talked about before, but paragraph 2, Logan's eyes are described as ugly. This is basically the second line of the story. Even the first line, Logan's way of laughing was bad. Like immediately,
Yeah,
just he's bad, he's ugly.
he's obscene. Like, it's not the way I would do it personally. I found it a bit too clunky in this novel, but I'm very into my nuanced monsters. So for me, it was a bit on the nose, personally. I can see why they did it, why Ray Bradbury did it the way he did, but eh.
Maybe these things were less clear back in the 40s, I don't know. But yeah, we've talked about before how you can set up someone as a villain just by saying they look bad a lot of the time. They're ugly. Ugly is bad.
Then it's interesting because the first scene, I Logan is set up as a villain, but also Brandon's the first one to act violently.
Yeah, that's
Like,
why I was skeptical for a bit longer than maybe I should have been.
like he said, I remember noticing at the time because he said it so much. He describes Logan as little so many times in his introduction.
Yeah, I imagine him kind of like Gollum.
Yeah, like, are you trying to say that Brandon is particularly tall, or like that Logan's particularly little? What are you trying to say here? Like,
Hard
As
to
a
tell.
short person, I'm wondering if I should be offended.
yeah, I was a bit like, what are you trying to say here?
I think he was just trying to contrast them physically.
So, what about setting up heroes then? Would you just say it's the opposite, make them be nice and
No,
wonderful?
Not
actually, I would.
necessarily.
The whole point, at least certainly in a longer story, is that for a hero, there needs to be the flaw because if you're perfect in the start, unless you've got a very static character arc, like I don't know, Superman, for example, typically you need the flaw to kind of become heroic. Like the point of Brandon's story, isn't it, that he, as Logan points out, he's not a fighter. He doesn't put himself into danger. He's a coward. So what he does at the end, for the sake of what he thinks is right, is brave by contrast, and that's what makes him the hero of the story. Doing the good thing despite the fear, and being very much setting up the fear in the first place.
Very
Excellent
well
point.
put.
Like if he started out brave and righteous, like I don't know, if he was Captain Kirk, the story wouldn't have the same emotional undercurrent.
I was thinking of Captain Kirk.
It's because it's sci-fi and everyone thinks of Captain Kirk.
No, I'm part of the hive mind.
So while you can have your more kind of traditional heroes, it depends on what you want them to do and what you want their character arc to be on how you set up your hero. Like sometimes the unlikely hero, for example, is very popular at the moment because it's the idea of a normal person becoming a hero. It's not someone who's magically strong or amazing or somehow more kinder than anyone else. It's the act of choosing to be the hero that makes you the hero.
I just like that in this story it's set up so well and so neatly. It's such a neat story. It does everything it needs to do so quickly and efficiently, and just it's so clean.
You know, he does set it up very neatly to unpick it very neatly and then straight into the action. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very good.
Did you guess the ending?
I did, kind of.
Yeah, same. I completely guessed the ending.
How did you guess?
Predictable. Not in like,
I thought it was going to be Logan sent him in place of Lazarus as like an evil scheme. But then when Brandon did it to himself, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
it did occur to me that Brandon might send Logan instead
Yeah,
of Lazarus, but I knew it was going to be one of them.
it does seem obvious.
I mean, when I say predictable, I don't necessarily mean that as a bad thing. Like, I know we love spoilers and plot twists and everything, but up to a certain point, if your story is predictable, it means it's because your characters are doing what you've set them up to do. It means
Yeah.
the story's kind of finishing in the way it makes sense to do so.
And even though I saw the ending coming before I got there, it was almost more fun because I was like, oh, I see where this is going. That's great, right?
Yeah.
Like, I still get the rush of like, oh, this is so cool. I just got it a bit earlier.
And it's not about the end point, it's about the journey of getting to the end.
Yeah.
Like, most of the time we know that, you know, good will win over evil. It's not about us or the couple will get together. It's not about whether or not they'll get together. It's about how they get together.
So you don't have to be throwing out crazy plot twists everywhere to write a good story, basically.
No.
You don't have to. And if your plot twist is completely unexpected, then it's probably bad.
Yes, unless you're quite careful. But also you are in danger of annoying your audience if you do a completely, like, say you're reading a nice fluffy romance and then one of them gets shot halfway through and it turns into a murder mystery story. That would be a great story, but it's not a romance.
Right. You're
can't
kind of
picture it as
misleading your readers at that point.
Yeah.
Is it always bad to mislead your readers, or does it depend on what it is?
It's bad to mislead them if you promise that you're going to give them a certain thing and then you don't. If you promise them a fluffy romance in your introduction, which looks like it's going to be a fluffy romance, and then you change your mind, you're going to have very angry readers.
I watched a horror film.
Yeah, but did you go into it knowing it was a horror film?
No, Mr. Lloyd didn't tell me, the bastard.
What film was that?
Oh, it was a Japanese film. It was, oh my god, Audition. It starts out like, oh, he's holding auditions to find a wife. It's funny and stupid. And then it's like, he finds the most horrifying wife ever. Spoilers for Audition, which I think is quite an old film.
But then horror often does set up a very normal first world before the horror sets in.
That's true.
I guess it's more knowing that you're going into a horror film, which most like book marketing and story marketing will make you aware of.
I did ask him if it was advertised as a rom-com, and he laughed at me and said, "Of course not." Because I was like, but I thought this was a silly film. He just got decapitated.
See, I quite enjoy stuff like that where it changes genres halfway through. But I'm probably the only person, and you don't see it very often because it's like a nightmare for marketing and all kinds of things.
It is, but when done well, I think it's exceptional.
Yeah.
Like Psycho, for example, does not quite that, but it changes the film you're watching. But I don't want to give spoilers.
I haven't seen it. Okay, so alright, let's talk a bit more about how... Well, when I read the ending, I immediately went, oh, it's like Beyond Lies the Wub. Because the exchange
this person
of
is
people...
actually this person.
Yeah. I know it's not actual body swapping, but it felt like I don't know, it just felt so similar to me. I was like, what the? Did I just
Well,
read the
it's the
same story?
same. It's the same genre, and it's like I think most good plot twists play with identity. Like it's such a common one, right? Be
Mm.
like, oh, this person was actually this person, or something like that,
You ain't my mother. Yes, I am.
right?
The nice EastEnders references for UK viewers. Sorry.
I want to point out I live in the UK and I have no idea.
Also, Luke, your father, whatever.
That's true. Yeah,
I've
that's
forgotten the
probably the
line.
better one. Luke, I am your father. Was it that?
No, but it's something
No,
like that.
it's something like that. We're failing at being iconic, but that's probably a better example to use because people will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I can see where you're coming with the similarity, but I also trying to decide who I think did it better. Wub was definitely more of a surprise
Yes,
and more horrifying.
yes.
Like, don't get me wrong, there is the implication that the protagonist is going to be tortured once the, story fades to black, which is pretty nasty, but
This one is definitely more of like a Pyrrhic victory, whereas in Wub you're like, oh no.
yeah.
I don't really feel like that at the end of Wub. I was just like, I'm so glad the Wub survived.
Really? You didn't find anything horrific about that?
Yeah, I found it horrific, but also I was like, yeah, good for the Wub.
I kind of agree, but you got to see that the tone is different somehow.
The tone is different. Last question then. Would you want to be resuscitated 300 years after your death? Why or why not?
Sure. I think this would
Yeah?
be cool.
Depends what they're resuscitating me for. Like, do I get to live a chill life in the future and see what it's like, or am I going to kind of awake to the middle of a war and Martians trying to, interrogate me for information or something weird, or people want to, dissect me or anything horrific? Like,
Didn't think about that when writing the question. I was just like, oh, I feel bad for Lazarus who's gonna wake up and everybody he knows is dead, and suddenly he's the key to winning the war. That is a lot of a pressure. I don't think I
it
could
is a
take
lot of
it. I
pressure.
think I'd rather stay dead.
But then again, he seems like the kind of scientist who'd kind of be prepared for that. Like, if they were
Yeah.
working on all the super secret weapons and things, then there is the implication that, might have been deliberate.
I hope that after Brandon's sacrifice, they can win the war. I would like to know more about this war with Mars, but that's just me.
Quite a common sci-fi thing, isn't it, to be at war with Mars?
Yeah. What is it that we don't like about? Is it just it's red? Or
I think it's
I
just because
mean,
it's the nearest planet that could reasonably be inhabited.
also, like, is Mars the Roman god of war?
yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
true.
So, like, there's a lot of, easy reference there.
I found it. I don't. Maybe this is just because I watched The Expanse recently. But I found it quite surprising that the Martians were like actual aliens.
Yeah.
Like,
Different time when the story came out, I suppose.
yeah, I feel like in like the modern era of sci-fi, if you say Martian, you think of a human who lives on Mars, or at least I do.
Is that because you're thinking of the Andrew Weir novel? Andy Weir.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know. Part of me still thinks Little Green Men.
yeah. I suppose. Although they're blue in this one for some reason.
Well, green would be a stereotype.
Yeah, you got to be slightly different.
Exactly.
Okay, that's the end of my questions.
Yeah.
Can I just mention some things about Ray Bradbury's style that I find really interesting?
Yes.
Yeah.
He has like such this active kind of style, which I really like. And I think it's because he kind of focuses on the verbs quite a lot. His verbs are really descriptive.
Yeah, he's got some good choice of words.
Have you got any highlights, either of you?
Like pursue rather than follow or chase.
Yeah, and at the start, he doesn't just grab Logan and hold him up against the wall. He is crucified against the wall. You're like, it's such a clear image.
Which arguably would set Logan up potentially as a more sacrificial character than he's ultimately played up as if you wanted to do deep reading.
True. But yeah, I really do like Ray Bradbury's style. I recommend you read more of his stories. They're all very good.
Have
He's
you
been
got
on my list for a long time.
any other favourites?
Let me think. 0 Hour was a bit weird, but it was a lot of fun. The concept was that all of the world's children were accidentally summoning evil aliens to come and take over the planet, but nobody took them seriously because they're all kids.
Interesting.
It was amazing.
It sounds
A
great.
bit, maybe a bit too weird for me to confidently recommend for the podcast, but I had a good time. Something a bit more serious, I liked Rocket Summer as well, which was all about how quite a political story about when the first rocket was made or was made in this world, and this basically the president has to call whether to launch it or not, and he gets really concerned it will be used badly, and you kind of have this common debate about the value of scientific advancement and whether that's going to cause more problems and stuff like this. It's a very cool story, especially for a perspective on a rocket launch from before, obviously the Mars landing, because it was written in the 40s. So a really cool story from that
Strange to
perspective.
think. Remember you asked earlier about whether or not the story was good for people who weren't familiar with sci-fi.
Yeah.
So Ray Bradbury apparently was very resistant to the categorization of being labeled as a science fiction writer, in that he said, first of all, I don't write science fiction. I've only done one science fiction book, and that's Fahrenheit 451, or 451, however you say, based on reality. Science fiction is a depiction of the real. Fantasy is a depiction of the unreal.
Ah.
Interesting.
It is an interesting point, isn't it, of sci-fi as fantasy that could, in some, however thin way, actually happen, and fantasy is something that couldn't happen.
Yeah.
So,
I would hesitate to call Fahrenheit 451 sci-fi even.
yeah, I mean, I haven't read it, so.
It's quite a grounded story in my opinion.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's funny to see how the definitions of these vary between people, and I'm sure they've changed over time a lot.
I guess if you're talking about really soft sci-fi, it's just fantasy set in space.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Wherever.
definitely things we call sci-fi now which are fantastical.
I've seen this argument over Star Wars, I'm sure.
No, it's a Western.
It's a Western.
Nobody can agree on the genre of Star Wars.
Well, not everything has to fit into a clear genre.
That's true.
I love a genre blend. Best stories, I think, are genre blends.
Any more for any more, or are we all done?
We're done.
Okay. Cool. Thank you for listening. Please leave a comment on our website to let us know what you thought. You can also find all our previous short stories and episodes. We'll be back with another story next week. Goodbye.